Movie lights. Don't waste your time watching complete movies and series.
The movie starts years after the end of the world due to the war on oil and all kinds of fuels. The number of people in the world is very low and the whole planet is in a state of chaos. People formed gangs to survive, and over time each gang became closed and lived by itself, and people became retarded and became like animals. And there is a person named Max. He decided to live alone in the desert so he wouldn't be retarded like the rest of the people. And he used to face anyone who got in his way alone. One day, while driving his car, he noticed that a gang was chasing him. So Max tried to get away from them, but they were many and they could overturn his car. Max wanted to get out of the car, but Joe's gang, they arrest him, tie him up, shave his hair, and put a gang tattoo on his body. This tattoo is proof that Max has become the private property of Joe's gang, and they arrested him so they could take the blood they wanted from him. And he monopolizes all the decisions of the town and comes out and talks to the people and says that he will send a team to get fuel from the town of gas and bullets from the town of ammunition, and the leader, Froisa, will be the leader of the team, and these are her men who will go out with Froisa on this mission. And Joe had a large amount of water in his castle and he cut it off from the people, and opens water tanks for the people while they are running and trying to get the water until Joe closed the water, and we see that people are fighting and beating each other for water, and then the Froisa team goes to the city of gas and ammunition, but on the way Froisa suddenly you get off the road and go another way without telling anyone. And the team has to walk behind her, and he doesn't understand. And when one of her team members asks her where we're going, she doesn't accept to tell him and orders him to walk behind her. And in Joe's castle there's somebody who sees her in the scene and tells Joe that Froisa has gone off the road and is going to another gang, and Joe didn't understand why Froisa would go to a gang, and they make problems with them and he begins to suspect that something is wrong. He goes to look for his wives, but he does not find them there because Froisa has taken them, and Joe gets angry and orders all his men to go out so that his wives can come back. And among his men was someone named Nax, and Nax was using Max as his own blood tank. Nax was originally injured, but he decided to take part in the chase because he is one of Joe's most loyal men and all of Joe's men will go, and Nax tied Max up and put him in front of his car. There is a hose that was transporting Max's blood, and Joe was with them, leading the gang and firing bombs in the sky, because they are asking for help and support from the leader of the gas and ammunition city, and the team with Froisa sees smoke is in the sky, and they ask Viriosa what exactly is happening, but Viriosa refuses to say anything. And on the other side, in the desert, there is a gang called Bizarre. They see the Viriosa team and they decide to go and finish them off. Really, they start to get close, and the Viriosa team, when they see them, ask Viriosa what he is doing, and Viriosa tells them that we have to drive fast and run away from them and be ready for the weapons, but there is one of the Viriosa cars falls into a trap, and the Buzzard gang beats the rest of the Froisa gang who are riding bicycles and try to cut the Froisa car tire, but the men of Froisa train this car with such a spear and destroy it, and Furiosa joins his men and gets rid of the other car, and Froisa thinks that it is safe, but a team of Joe is very close to her, and also other cars from the Buzzard gang appear, and a big confrontation happens between the two gangs, but Joe's team confronts them and gets rid of them, and he was able to get his prize car, but he finds himself in a sandstorm, and a man from the Furiosa team understands that she is cheating on Joe, so he faces Froisa and strangles her, so she has to hit him. And Kinks was very close and wanted to shoot Froisa, but Froisa in the truck approached him in the wheel of a car. NX explodes and a relapse orders one of his colleagues to untie the mix and tie it to the back of the car. But Max, once freed, was able to hit this man and make him fall, and he wanted to get into a car. But Nax closed all. Nax sees his friends dying in the air, and he decides to sacrifice himself in exchange for catching Froisa and drowning it in gasoline, and at that time he enters the sandstorm. Max keeps holding the car with all his strength. Froisa gets rid of the car next to it. Froisa changes its destination and goes in another direction, but Nax sees it well and chases it, and Nax decides to sacrifice himself in exchange for catching Froisa and drowning his car with gasoline, and Max, he pays attention to what he is doing, breaks the glass of the car and tries to stop this crazy person. While they are fighting, Froisa hits them with the truck, and then Max wakes up, finds himself healthy, and removes the hose that was draining his blood, but he was still tied to Nax with chains, so he goes to see Nax's body to hit the chain with fire and be freed, but the gun It doesn't work, and Max sees from a distance the shipment of Froisa, so he removes Nax and takes it there, and he sees Froisa and Joe's wives, the five, and they have a hose of water. Max raises the weapon at them and asks them to drink some water, so one of them comes forward and gives him a hose, and Max drinks. Water is sprayed on Nax, and Max starts to wake him up. Max asks. Max doesn't notice that Froisa attacks him and steals the gun from him and shoots him, but also that the gun doesn't work, and the two of them fight, but Joe's wives pull Max off the chain, and Froisa gets up to get the gun out of the truck, but then Nax wakes up and jumps on it. He seizes the opportunity and grabs the gun, but Froisa appears behind him and tries to make him shoot himself. Joe's wives catch Nax, and Max fights Froisa again, and in the end he is able to overcome her and get her to the ground, making sure the gun he has works. Everyone sees Joe's team approaching, and Nax is happy and tells Max, Joe, this will bring us a great reward, because we caught them alive, but it seems that Max is not interested in this conversation at all, and he orders Nax to cut the chain. Once freed, he gets into the truck alone and moves quickly before Joe arrives. But the truck has a special code that no one but Froisa knows, so the truck stops once and doesn't move. Froisa comes to him and asks him to let her drive so they can all run away. Max had no choice but to agree and let Froisa drive and Joe's women ride, and Max had a gun pointed at them to be on the lookout for them. And Furiosa continues her journey to the Green Valley, where she wanted to go from the beginning. The Green Valley is a place suitable for living and farming. Only women live there, and when they move, Nax sneaks in and rides in the truck, hiding until the right moment to attack. While they are on the tracks, the speed of the truck slows down, so Max goes to see what the problem is and finds out that the problem is in the queens and fixes it. At the same time, Nax sneaks up to the front of the truck and tries to strangle Furiosa, but Joe's wives. They hit him and threw him completely out of the truck, and Froisa was approaching an area called George, and Froisa told Max, I agreed with the gang here that they would smuggle us and open the road in exchange for giving them a tank of fuel. But since Joe's gang is after us, you go hide and be ready for any betrayal that might happen to us. Froisa arrives at the George, gets out of the truck, and says loudly to the gang, I will leave our fuel tank in the desert. She asks the gang to throw stones behind her so that the road is blocked and the George gang appears on motorcycles. But Furiosa, you find a gang coming close, so you understand that they will not have time to finish the negotiations, so they call to Max to drive the truck. The Gurish gang blows up rocks and blocks the road to keep Joe's gang out of their territory, and then they chase a Furiosa car with motorcycles to get fuel, and they were nervous that Furiosa had brought the Joe gang here, and they throw a bomb at the front of the truck while Joe is riding in the big car to get through the rocks. And he takes his best men with him in the car, and he gets to them and he says to Joe, I was with Froisa in the truck, so he lets NX ride with him, and they come and make his men do something and tell them that when he crossed over to the other side, they blew up these rocks. And really, a giant air car can go through. And on the other side, a gang of Gurish jump on a Froisa car, and they throw bombs at it, and the fire in the front of the car grows, but Froisa find a solution and move the front of the car down so that a large amount of sand comes out of the car, so that this sand extinguishes the fire. And Furiosa and Max start shooting at these gangs, and Ryusa alone can kill some of them, but this gang doesn't give up. And there is someone who lights a can of dynamite to throw it into the driver's cabin. But Froisa hits this person with a gun in the face. The man sits under the truck and dies, and the dynamite explodes in the last car that has the tank. And after they get rid of the garish gang, Joe entertains them, chases them, and comes. Joe pulls out his gun to shoot Froisa, but Joe's wife opens the door and defends Froisa. Froisa takes advantage of the situation and kills one of Joe's men, and Joe gives Nax a gun and orders him to sneak into the truck and kill Froisa. Nax actually carries out the order, but with the chain in his hand, he signs for it, and Joe loses hope in him, and they drive fast and jump from a rock and stays in front, and one of Joe's men named Ricketts fires a spear into Max's wagon and pulls it so that Max's shield is jammed, but one of Joe's women whose name is in Hart gets out of the wagon and cuts the chain, and Froisa puts a tool to make up for the wagon, but a rock suddenly appears in front of them and they hit it, and Joe's favorite wife. In Hart, she was staggering, but she stayed alive, and when she came back, she got into the car. Her legs slipped and hung on the door and she couldn't get in the car. The door gave way and fell, and Joe wanted to trample her, but he caught himself and his car flipped over. Joe's wife thought in heart is alive and they asked Max to come back and save her, but he didn't agree and said it was over. She died, and Furiosa decided that they should continue their journey to the Green Valley. Joe held the body of his favorite wife and cried for her because she was pregnant in the first place. Some men arrived on motorcycles and Joe ordered them to leave. The engine of a Furiosa car started to smoke because of the temperature, so they stopped in the car so that Furiosa could fix the engine, and by coincidence, and she see Joe's men on motorcycles, and she kills them, and then she goes on their way. And one of Joe's wives goes back to the car to watch what is the situation. But she finds Max there. He is upset and angry. She asks him what is wrong with you. He tells her that Joe won't forgive him because I have disappointed him. She tries to calm him down and sits next to him and talks to him and decides not to tell anyone that he is here. Max drives the car through the night, until the car gets stuck in the mud, and it turns out that they have reached the mud swamps. So Max and the others decide to use the delay to their advantage and plant bombs in the mud to explode. A gang of Joe continues their journey. 2 of the air cars are exploding from the bombs, and the rest of the convoy is broken down because of the mud. The commander of Ammunition City was with them and fought that until now he has not entered into any battle, and he decides to set off with his men alone, and this is because his car is against mud because he has a tank structure, and on the other side, Max's car is jammed again, and they had to find a solution before their enemies arrived, and in fact the Ammunition City commander was approaching them, so Max decided to shoot him, and he shoots him with 2 bullets, but they don't come at him, so he shoots the last bullet and comes right into the headlight of the ammunition commander's car. And he is the commander. He gets blinded, and Max wanted to help. And Max wanted to help Furiosa and Max. And he comes out of his hiding place and tells them that I have an idea to make the truck move and that we tie the truck to this tree because the tree will help the truck get out of the mud. And at the same time, the ammunition commander decides to shoot them like crazy. And he doesn't care if Joe dies sometimes while Max is driving the car after. They tied him to the tree, and his plan worked, and he was able to get the car out of the mud with the help of the tree. But they face another problem. The temperature of the engine is high. Max decides to stop and ambush the ammunition commander, and Max advances alone. Furiosa cools the developer, and then you see explosions in the dark, and I don't know if Max is alive or dead. So you raise the gun as a spare on the person coming out of the darkness, but Max comes out and brings the steering wheel and the supplies that were with the ammunition commander, and they move in the car and get out of the mud swamps and get away from this deserted area where there were strange creatures and dead people. In the morning, they would have reached the Green Valley, but they find nothing there except a woman standing on a tower asking for help, and Max doubts that this is a foretaste of Furiosa. She comes out and says aloud, I lived in the Green Valley when I was young, and my mother and I were kidnapped a long time ago. When the lady on the tower heard this, she calls. Furiosa tells them how Joe came to kidnap her and her mother, telling them that I traveled all this way to return to live in the Green Valley, but the women tell her that you really passed by the Green Valley when you came, and it turns out that this Green Valley is the swamp of mud that they were trapped in because it had become uninhabitable, as evidenced by the dead trees they saw. Furiosa is shocked by what she has heard and doesn't know what to do or where to go. She sits all day thinking of a solution and finally repeats that they should go east and find a place that has arable land and build that place and live only there. They will leave the truck here and ride the motorcycles, and she says to Max, come with us if he wants, but Max refuses and tells her, I will walk in my only way. And Furiosa decides to leave him as he wants, and Furiosa and all the women go with the motorcycles, and Max sees them from a distance until they disappear in front of him. But suddenly Max gets a dangerous idea and decides to catch up with Furiosa quickly and really. He follows them, stops them, and tells them to go on into the desert. This is a very dangerous thing to do, and there is no evidence that they will find anything. So the best solution is to go back to Joe's city, and Max's plan is to go back by the same road they came from, and lure Joe and his men into the mud swamps, fight Joe's men, kill them, and then go back to Joe's city. And then they control the town for them, and even though it is a very dangerous plan, everybody likes it and agrees to it, and everybody goes back to the truck and goes to Joe and his men after they come out of the mud swamps. They are standing and resting from the chase and they see Furiosa's truck. It is going towards the town and immediately his men move and chase it and there is one of Joe's cars. They get to the truck and there is an exchange of gunfire. One of the soldiers came to increase the speed of the car, and the people got into the truck and made the same movement, and this movement was a danger to the car's engine. But Viriosa doesn't want the men to go ahead of her, and in the end the women with her kill the driver of the car. But the first engine of the Freusa truck is broken, and the second engine is about to explode, so the Freusa truck slows down its speed, and Max orders Nax to fix the first engine, and Max will go to dismantle the fuel tank. But at the same time the soldiers inside are very close and hit some spears in the back of the truck, and this slows down the truck. Max risks his life and goes to get rid of these spears, and when Joe's cars come close, they find women in their faces and shoot them. At the same time, Max is getting rid of all the spears and he is returning to his chair, but Joe's soldiers are approaching him while they are hanging on the disobedience and jumping on the truck, and Max is fighting them while another soldier is throwing a smoke bomb in the driver's cab, and wraps a rope around Furiosa's neck, so a woman comes out and hits this soldier and throws Viriosa, but this woman doesn't pay attention to the person behind her who kills her with a saw, and Viriosa gets rid of the smoke bomb and kills anyone who comes near the driver's cabin. And Max was still alive and facing Joe's soldiers, but he was hit by an arrow comes in his hand, so Max falls and loses consciousness, and the number of Joe's men is much higher. One of them kidnaps one of Joe's wives, and no one knows how to get him up. Max wakes up and returns to fight, and there is one who wants to kill him with a saw, and Max falls, but Frieza follows him at the last minute, and another soldier sneaks into the truck and stabs Freusa, and Freusa resists. She carries Max with her iron hands, and Joe's women get rid of the soldier who did this. Nax was able to fix the first engine, get out of it, and shoot Max for the car he was walking next to, and Max clashes with the people in that car, throws a soldier out of it, hits the leader of the gas town with his leg, loses consciousness, and Max takes over the whole truck. Joe approaches Max to kill him, but Max uses the gas commander as a shield and shoots him. Joe's women tell Max that Freusa is badly injured. Max jumps out of the truck and explodes it in Joe's convoy. Before he gets to Freusa's truck, a soldier grabs him and tries to throw him from Joe's car onto the road, and the car with the atmosphere moves in front of the Freusa transport, and Joe tries to disable the Freusa transport. Freusa lets Nax take command, and she goes for Joe's car. Joe's man fights her, but Max arrives and hits Ricketts, a man with Joe on his head. Ricketts throws Max with one hand and Freusa fights with this soldier while Ricketts hits Max, but one of the six distracts Ricketts. Max seizes the opportunity and hits him in the brain with a tube, knocking him unconscious. Nax knocks the Arab Joe from behind the soldier who was fighting with Freusa back, and Freusa approaches Joe from the window, ties an iron bicycle to a mast, and throws the two of them into the tire. In Joe's face, Joe falls because he can't live without the mask, and this is a big part of Freusa's plan, and Max will succeed. Joe's wives all get out of the truck and ride with Max and Freusa, but at this point Ricketts wakes up and removes the engine from a Freusa truck to throw it on Joe's car, but Nax sacrifices himself in exchange for their lives and turns himself into the truck, and blocks the way for the rest of Joe's convoy. Although the mission was successful, not everything was good because Freusa was in bad condition, she was dying and he lost a lot of blood, so Max decided to transfuse her blood. After a while they arrived in Joe's city and Max was back with the guards. Joe's head, everyone is celebrating because they finally got rid of the oppressive ruler. And they opened the water to the people so that they can use the water as they want, and Viriosa is appointed the new ruler, and Max goes down to walk among the people and leaves the city to continue his journey and adventure, and so we will have reached the end of the first part and wait for us in the summary of the second part.
And finish the movie. Don't forget to say your opinion about this movie in the comments, and you can also suggest movies in the comments that we summarize on the channel of Movie Light. And don't forget to follow the channel, and goodbye.